Okay, folks, buckle up. Today on the Mysteria Archive, we take a close look at a largely forgotten conspiracy in America's history, the Black Tom explosion in New York's harbour. Get ready for a wild ride. It's July 30th, 1916. Just after 2 in the morning, New York City is shaken awake by an explosion so powerful it rattles skyscrapers, shatters windows in Times Square, and jolts people out of bed across 5 states. The source? A munitions depot on a small man-made island in Jersey City called Black Tom. In an instant, over £2 million of explosives erupt into fire and fury. The blast damages the Statue of Liberty, forces Ellis Island to evacuate, and creates shockwaves that some say were felt as far away as Philadelphia and Maryland. Officially, the story is simple. German saboteurs struck America on its own soil, but unofficially, well, that's where the cracks begin to show. From cover-ups to strange coincidences, ritual symbolism, and even whispers of a Mandela effect, the Black Tom explosion has become one of America's most forgotten and most mysterious conspiracies. Okay, time out. First off, can we just appreciate the name Black Tom? That sounds less like a munitions depot and more like a pirate who runs a speakeasy. But seriously, how is this not one of the most famous events in US history? An explosion so big permanently scars the Statue of Liberty, and yet barely anyone talks about it. It's almost like history went, nope, don't need this one, and just deleted the file. And of course, that only makes it way more suspicious. If something this huge barely registers in our collective memory, you've got to wonder, was it forgotten by accident or on purpose? A night of fire and fury. The night of July 30th, 1916 began like any other along the New Jersey waterfront. The Black Tom Island Depot, a patch of reclaimed land in Jersey City, was stacked with warehouses, freight cars, and barges crammed with ammunition. America was still officially neutral in the Great War, but arms sales to Allied nations were booming. At around 2:08 a.m., everything changed. A fire broke out near one of the rail cars, igniting the stockpiled explosives. Within moments, the night sky turned into daylight. The ground shook like an earthquake. The explosion was so massive it registered as a 5.5 on the Richter scale. People in Manhattan thought a gas main had blown. In Brooklyn, church windows shattered. In Philadelphia, doors rattled. Even in Maryland, residents reported hearing the thunder. On Ellis Island, panicked immigrants were rushed from their beds and ferried to safety. The Statue of Liberty herself was hit by flying shrapnel. One blast tore into her torch, which has been closed to visitors ever since. The official death toll was reported at 4 to 7 people, but some believe the true number was higher, covered up to prevent panic or political fallout. And then comes the strangest part. Despite being one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, Black Tom somehow slipped into obscurity. Most Americans have never heard of it. For an event that literally shook the East Coast, the silence around it is almost as unsettling as the blast itself. So, what really happened that night? Was it sabotage, negligence, or something deeper? All right, let's just stop and think about this. A 5.5 magnitude blast in the middle of New York Harbour. Ellis Island evacuated, Lady Liberty herself getting a shrapnel makeover. And we're supposed to believe only 4 people died. Sure. I mean, I've stubbed my toe harder than that and at least 10 people have heard about it. But really, the weirdest part isn't even the explosion, it's how fast the whole thing just disappeared. Like, you'd think kids would be learning this in history class, right between the Boston Tea Party and Pearl Harbor. Instead, nada. Which makes you wonder, who decided Black Tom didn't make the cut? The German sabotage theory. In the official story, the Black Tom explosion has a neat explanation: German saboteurs. By 1916, the United States hadn't yet entered World War I. Technically, America was neutral, but neutral didn't mean uninvolved. US factories and depots were shipping massive amounts of ammunition, rifles and explosives to Britain, France and Russia. And Germany? Well, they weren't exactly thrilled about that. So the story goes like this. German agents secretly slipped into the Black Tom depot and planted incendiary devices. The goal wasn't to kill Americans, at least not directly, but to stop that mountain of weapons from reaching the Allies. Years later, investigators tied Black Tom to a wider sabotage campaign. German spies operating in the US were blamed for dozens of mysterious fires, ship explosions, and factory accidents across the country. It was industrial warfare fought in shadows, while politicians still debated neutrality in daylight. The shock of Black Tom also exposed how unprepared America was for espionage on its own soil. At the time, the US had no real federal intelligence agency. In the years that followed, the demand for better counter-espionage directly paved the way for organizations like the FBI to rise to power. On paper, the case seemed airtight. In 1939, more than 2 decades after the blast, Germany finally agreed to pay reparations, effectively admitting responsibility. Case closed, right? But here's where it gets murky. For some, the German saboteur explanation felt a little too tidy. The investigation dragged on for years, with evidence often thin and circumstantial. Witnesses contradicted each other. Some leads went cold, and the fact that it took until the brink of World War II for Germany to officially take the blame only added more fuel to the conspiracy fires. So, was it really German saboteurs that night, or was the story convenient? Okay, so according to the official line, sneaky Germans in trench coats snuck into Jersey City, blew up a depot, and strolled out like it was a Scooby-Doo episode. Sure. Look, I'm not saying it didn't happen. Sabotage campaigns were real. But doesn't it feel a little too perfect? Like, oh, we found the bad guys, everyone relax. It's the historical equivalent of your little brother breaking the TV and blaming the dog. Technically possible, but you're side-eyeing him the whole time. And let's not forget, this is 1916. Security at Black Tom wasn't exactly Fort Knox. If spies did this, it was almost too easy. In fact, it was so easy that it scared the US government into realizing it had basically zero counter-espionage. That fear became one of the sparks that pushed America to build up real intelligence services, eventually giving rise to the FBI, which ironically owes part of its existence to a bunch of German saboteurs sneaking around New Jersey. Timing is everything. Here's where things start to get really suspicious. The Black Tom explosion didn't just happen in a vacuum. It happened 1 year before the US officially entered World War I. Now, think about that. In 1916, most Americans didn't want to join the war in Europe. The country was wary of foreign entanglements. But after Black Tom, anti-German sentiment in the US skyrocketed. Suddenly, people weren't just reading about a distant conflict overseas. They felt the shockwaves right in New York Harbor. For some fringe researchers, this timing feels less like coincidence and more like calculation. Now, could the explosion have been allowed to happen, or worse, orchestrated, to nudge public opinion towards the war? Consider this. Propaganda campaigns were already in motion, shaping how Americans saw Germany. Newspapers played up atrocities, political speeches hinted at threats to the US soil, and then, like clockwork, Black Tom goes up in flames. It was the kind of event that was tailor-made to stoke fear and anger. And here's the kicker. America entered World War I less than a year later. Now, does that mean the US government secretly staged or enabled the explosion? No, not necessarily. But if you squint, the timing lines up a little too neatly. And history has shown us again and again, sometimes disasters end up serving agendas they were never meant to. Black Tom wasn't just a blast. It was a psychological shockwave. And in that shockwave, some say you can hear the first rumblings of America marching towards the war. All right, now let me play devil's advocate here. If this wasn't orchestrated to push America into the war, then wow, what a convenient timing, like suspiciously convenient. Imagine you're a politician in 1916, trying to convince the public we need to fight Germany. That's a tough sell. Until boom, Germany allegedly blows up a depot in New York. Suddenly, your argument just writes itself. Now, I'm not saying Woodrow Wilson was standing there with a match going whoops, but when an event checks every box for shifting public opinion, you've got to at least raise an eyebrow. Coincidence? Maybe. Psychological operation? Maybe. Either way, Black Tom lit more than explosives. It lit the fuse of American anger. A wound to Lady Liberty. The Statue of Liberty has always stood as more than just a monument. She's a symbol, a beacon, a kind of stone and metal promise of freedom. But on July 30th, 1916, that symbol was scarred forever. When the munitions at Black Tom erupted, the force of the blast ripped through New York Harbor. Shrapnel and shockwaves battered nearby structures. Ellis Island was evacuated. Windows shattered in Manhattan. But one of the most enduring wounds was delivered to Lady Liberty herself. The explosion sent metal fragments tearing into her gown and pedestal. More importantly, it damaged the torch, the very flame that was supposed to symbolize enlightenment and hope. Since that night, the statue's torch has been permanently closed to the public. You can go inside her crown, but not to her light. On the surface, it's just tragic collateral damage. But for those who see symbolism in history, it's chilling. Was this simply an accident or something more? Some researchers argue the attack wasn't just about destroying munitions, it was a symbolic strike, a ritual act meant to extinguish America's light of freedom. The timing and the target line up eerily. Out of all the places in New York Harbor, Black Tom sat right at the foot of the statue. And of all the damage sustained, it was the torch, the flame of liberty, that was silenced. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the blast wasn't just sabotage, but a message, a reminder that even symbols of strength can be wounded. Okay, let's just pause here. The torch of liberty gets shut down forever because of Black Tom. You're telling me that's a coincidence? Sure. And my neighbour's cat is definitely not plotting against me. Seriously though, it's one of those details that makes the whole event feel more like a story than just an accident. It's like history itself decided to add some dramatic flair. And you have to wonder, if you were sending a symbolic message, could you come up with a better one? Strike at the torch, take out the light, boom. Suddenly, this isn't just sabotage, it feels ritualistic, almost theatrical. And that's the part that keeps conspiracy thinkers hooked. The cover-up effect. Here's something strange. For an event that shook half the East Coast, killed people, scarred the Statue of Liberty, and literally made history, the Black Tom explosion almost vanished from memory. Seriously, ask most people today if they've heard of it, and you'll get blank stares. Compare that to Pearl Harbor or even the Great Chicago Fire, and the difference is staggering. Part of the silence comes down to paperwork. Insurance claims dragged on for decades. It wasn't until 1939, more than 20 years later, that Germany officially accepted responsibility and agreed to pay reparations. By then, 2 decades of new headlines had buried the story. But for some, this wasn't just forgetfulness, it was deliberate. Think about it. Black Tom raised uncomfortable questions. How could a supposedly neutral America be sitting on such a dangerous stockpile of munitions in the first place? How could security be so lax that saboteurs just waltzed in? And if the timing really did help push America toward war, well, that's the kind of story governments don't exactly want taught in classrooms. Fringe researchers argue the erasure wasn't accidental, it was part of a cover-up. If Black Tom was more than sabotage, if it hinted at a deeper manipulation, then downplaying it kept those threads from unraveling. So, was it forgotten because people moved on? Or was it erased because remembering might raise the wrong questions? Alright, I've got to say, this whole forgotten tragedy angle makes my eyebrows do that skeptical arch thing. Like, how do you forget this? A blast that rattled Times Square, scarred Lady Liberty, and could be felt in Philly. That's not the kind of thing you just lose between the couch cushions of history. So yeah, maybe people were distracted. Maybe World War I and then the Roaring Twenties pushed it off the front page. But maybe someone gave it a little nudge into obscurity. Because if you tell this story too loud, people start asking hard questions. Who benefited? Who knew? And why don't we talk about it now? And history loves its mysteries neat and tidy, even if the edges aren't. Mandela Effect Mystery. If you thought Black Tom was just about sabotage and war, here's where it takes a very strange turn, the Mandela Effect. For those who aren't familiar, the Mandela Effect is when large groups of people swear they remember history differently than it's officially recorded. And when it comes to Black Tom, the Statue of Liberty becomes ground zero for one of the strangest cases. Ask people about visiting Lady Liberty's torch. Many will insist they've been there, climbed all the way up, and looked out from inside the flame. Except that hasn't been possible since 1916. The Black Tom explosion damaged the torch so badly it's been permanently closed to the public for over a century. Yet the memories persist. It doesn't stop there. Some swear the statue isn't even on Liberty Island, but on Ellis Island instead. Check the maps, and it's always been Liberty. But these conflicting memories get even weirder when you remember that Black Tom sits just offshore from Liberty Island itself, right in the middle of this geographical confusion. And then there's the strangest memory gap of all. For many people, Black Tom itself doesn't exist in their minds. Ask around and you'll find countless Americans who were never taught about it in school, or who swear they'd never even heard the name. How does one of the biggest non-nuclear explosions in history just vanish from our collective education? And to some, that absence feels less like oversight and more like a glitch in the record of history itself. Fringe theorists ask, did the force of the explosion create more than physical damage? Could it have left ripples in our collective memory, bending the way history is remembered? It sounds bizarre, but it fits the theme. Black Tom isn't just forgotten, it's misremembered. Maybe this is more than history fading away. Maybe the blast altered how reality itself is filed in our minds. Okay, so either thousands of people are having very vivid dreams about climbing into a torch that's been off limits for a century, or something really funky is going on here. Personally, I don't even trust my memory of what I had for breakfast yesterday, so I'm not the best judge. But here's the thing. It's not just the torch or Ellis Island. A lot of people don't even remember Black Tom at all. They swear they never learned about it in school, never saw it in a textbook, never even heard the name. And we're talking about an explosion that rattled the East Coast and scarred the Statue of Liberty. How do you just miss that? So yeah, maybe it's bad memory. Maybe it's sloppy education. Or maybe, just maybe, it's another glitch in the historical record. Either way, it makes you wonder if history sometimes edits itself when we're not looking. Haunted ground and lingering shadows. Even if you dismiss the Mandela effect, Black Tom still casts a shadow, one that people claim you can feel to this day. The site of the explosion, now part of Liberty State Park in Jersey City, looks peaceful enough. Families picnic there. Joggers cut through its paths, and kids play with no idea of what once happened. But locals say the ground holds a different kind of memory. Historians describe the event as so traumatic, so violent, that it left more than just physical scars. Visitors have reported strange sensations, sudden chills, feelings of dread, or the sense of being watched. Paranormal investigators call it residual haunting. When an event is so catastrophic, it imprints itself onto the land like a recording that won't stop replaying. Some physics claim the area radiates bad energy, as though the munitions blast cracked open something deeper than just a warehouse. Others argue the haunting isn't supernatural at all, but psychological. When you stand on the ground where the shockwaves once shattered glass in Times Square, maybe the weight of history presses on you whether you believe it or not. Fringe researchers take it even further. What if Black Tom isn't just remembered by the land, but guarded by it? That unease, they say, isn't random. It's the echo of secrets still buried beneath the rubble. Secrets the explosion was meant to hide. So, haunted parks. Because who doesn't want their family picnic to come with a free side of existential dread? I mean, imagine tossing a frisbee while someone nearby is like, yeah, this is where the air used to feel cursed. Great. Pass the potato salad. But seriously, I get it. Places carry weight. You walk through a battlefield, you feel something. You stand where tragedy struck, you feel it too. And whether that's ghosts or just our brains being dramatic, who knows? Still, if you visit Liberty State Park and your hot dog suddenly tastes weird, maybe it's not the mustard. Maybe it's history reminding you it's not as dead and buried as it looks. Closing thoughts. When all is said and done, the Black Tom explosion is remembered officially as sabotage, a covert act carried out by German agents during World War I, striking at America while the country was still technically neutral. It fits neatly into the history books that way, a closed case. But once you peel back the layers, that neatness starts to unravel. The timing, just a year before America joined the war, feels too perfect. The symbolism of Lady Liberty's torch, the extinguishing of light, adds a ritualistic edge that's hard to ignore. The near erasure of the event from history books feels less like oversight and more like deliberate silence. And then, of course, there are the strange echoes, the Mandela effect memories, the reports of haunted ground, and the whispers of something bigger hiding just out of reach. So, was Black Tom simply sabotage, or was it repurposed into something larger? A psychological push toward war, a symbolic strike against freedom, or maybe even a chapter in a story we've only begun to uncover? In the end, the mystery lingers not because we're sure of the answer, but because of the questions it leaves behind. That's the real power of Black Tom. It reminds us that when history leaves holes, mystery doesn't just creep in, it rushes in. And sometimes, those mysteries refuse to stay buried. So, officially, it's sabotage, case closed. But unofficially, well, we just went down a rabbit hole with more tunnels than the New York subway system. I mean, maybe it really was just German agents with a match and bad intentions. But when you add the timing, the symbolism, the forgotten history, yeah, you can see why people raise an eyebrow. At the very least, it proves one thing. History isn't just about what happened, it's about what we believe happened. And when the two don't line up, that's when things get interesting and spooky. Mostly spooky. Now, if you're one of the lucky few to have the new hype button below, please smash it 3 times and it will give this video a boost. I'd really appreciate it as we're trying to chase down 100,000 subs. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this one. And don't forget to let me know in the comments below of videos you would like to see next. I do listen. In fact, this video came from one of your suggestions. Okay, my friends, be safe. And until next time, stay curious.